This is great. So we're going to talk about how we can shift the tide for young New Zealanders and their finances. Let me give a proper introduction to these three spectacular people. So sitting to my right, I've been so excited to meet you because you're incredible. Te Kahukura is... am I allowed to say how old you are? I mean, at some point you're going to not want people to know. She's 18 and she's... I know, listen to that, the response. Everyone's going, oh my God, I did nothing when I was 18. So, she's in her second year of her Bachelor of Law at the University of Waikato. She's on a mission to empower Māori to become financially independent. She is the founder of Māori Millionaire, which is a podcast and a blog which gives resources to educate and inspire Māori to learn about personal finance and investing. So she's a fantastic voice that we're very lucky to have with us this morning. What is that? Is that the bell that keeps ringing? Is there a shop? Is it? Shall I just tune that out and ignore it? It's not important.
Someone's just sort of standing there going through every time
I
you
think
speak.
that's what's going on. I love it.
Food or deliveries, maybe.
Sounds great. And so next to Te Kahukura is Brad. Brad Olsen, he's Principal Economist and Director at Infometrics. He's one of New Zealand's leading economic commentators. The thing about Brad is that he's passionate about using economics to make better decisions, and he's really good at making complex and detailed trends simple and relatable and useful. I've met him before and I know that he's very good at this. He's also a great community leader. Amongst other things, he was Young Wellingtonian of the Year in 2020. And next to them is Sonia. Sonia Williams is the co-founder, director and CEO of Sharesies. Sonia has built a career in tech, global marketing and product management in New Zealand companies like Xero and KiwiBank. She's passionate about using tech to solve big problems and to create a more equitable society, and she's grabbing the opportunity to make investing more accessible. Sonia was the co-winner of the 2020 Women of Influence Business Award alongside co-founder Brooke Roberts. Give them all a round of applause. Great to have you here. Yay. All right, so I'm going to chuck out some questions at you. You guys throw your questions into Slido. I'll leave my questions behind in a little while and focus on yours. But let's begin. I want to know how much we know about the secret financial lives of young people. Can I start with you, Sonia? Can you answer? Are you a good person to answer that one for a start?
Yeah, I can. I feel like everyone's got something to add here, but I can kick off. And I think, well, there's so much, and it is kind of assumption, based not all young people are the same. And I feel like a bit of a fraud talking about young people next to an 18-year-old, but this is great. You're maybe more the expert on the subject here. But I think, what we are seeing is that there are changes to how, there are significant changes to how we live our lives that are impacting the way that financial services need to operate and how we need to engage with those. So I think key ones are like relationships to work and income, and we can see the rise of like portfolio careers. We can also see the changes to relationships to work with people wanting more flexible hours and not necessarily wanting to work 40-hour weeks because they want to balance that against another lifestyle or some other kind of goals. The other ones are, we've talked a bit about home ownership today. And I think the things around, I was at an event this week, shout out to Sim, who had a book launch this week. And after, people coming up to me and saying, actually, I don't even think I can buy a house. I don't even see that as part of my life. And I don't even know if I want one. So this idea that renting for life, what does that look like and how do we support that as an industry? And then the other one is like, different options to create wealth, because when we talk about home ownership, and a lot of how we've talked about it today is as a big asset and is about how we're building kind of secure and financial resilience. But what does that look like when those different wealth opportunities open up, or what are those different wealth opportunities to grow that, because that needs to change as well. But I think that's kind of key. I think the not so secret is people talking about money more, which is awesome. And, maybe that's a good segue into...
Yeah, I want to dive into your thoughts on this now. The secret life of young people and their relationship with money.
Kia ora, e te whare. Well, my money life isn't very secret. I post everything on Instagram. But I think there is a desire for a lot of young people to be a bit more creative about how we make money and how we use our money. I think during lockdown and during these periods, we're kind of more creative about, do we really want to be working 40 hours a week for someone else, helping someone else build their own empire, when we can be doing that for ourselves. So I think there is a desire for us to be, creating our own empire as opposed to someone else's. I think that at the same time, though, there are a lot of issues that rangatahi especially are facing. And the financial literacy, for young people is really, it's not that good. And so a lot of people are starting adulthood not knowing the basics about finances, and I think that's really detrimental. When you're signing up to get a bank account and you don't actually know the difference between an EFTPOS card and a credit card and a debit card, that's going to have really bad impacts when you start using those different cards, and then your bills come in.
Is the solution for that at school, or is it, following what you do on your blog, or listening to your podcast? What is the right place to get that information to young people is what I'm asking.
Well, yeah, I think that you need to have a diversified kind of information source. If you're only following it from one person, then it's going to be very concentrated on, their own values and their own ideas. But if you're able to, follow several Instagram accounts, listen to several podcasts and radio stations and, read a wide range of information, then you're going to be able to, take the nuggets of gold from all these different places and then, recreate it for your own life and decide how you want to implement this in your own life. I feel like as Māori we need to do that, especially because lots of the financial resources aren't, designed with our Māori perspectives in mind. So it's really important that we're able to listen to all these different resources and then add our own little spice to it.
Hold that thought because I so want to dive down into that, but we'll get there. Brad, can you talk to me?
I was going to say, don't feel like you have to be fair. We can continue on with that line of conversation if you want. I'm happy to.
Well, okay, I'm going to take you up on that. That's very kind of you. Because I do want to, Kahukura, I want to ask that question. I'll let you have a breath in a moment. But I want to ask you how Te Ao Māori offers a unique perspective on our money lives. Can you flesh that out for me?
Yeah, kia ora. I think that being Māori is the biggest form of wealth in my own life. I feel like Te Ao Māori offers a really amazing range of customs, tikanga, that we're able to include, especially when we think of finances. So if we think about manaakitanga, one form of that, in my opinion, is if you're able to generate passive income so that you can financially provide for your own whānau and for your iwi and your hapu, then you're not going to be in the situation where a lot of our kaumātua are in now, where they're reliant on their children and their grandchildren for financial things. And I think that we can evolve our culture over time where maybe we, create these financial resources for ourselves so that we can, help the rest of our whānau too.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. That's a really lovely way to begin to frame the rest of the conversation that we're having. Brad, now I'm jumping in.
Fantastic. Oh, can I just follow on from that?
Yeah.
Just to a point, and I think because that is part of the thing that I've certainly noticed talking to peers up and down the country is that people are looking for wanting to use their money in a slightly different way from before. It is less transactional. I mean, look, the mighty dollar still rules. People still want a good return at the end of the day, but increasingly to the point around Te Ao Māori values and similar, they want that for a different reason. There's a bit more of a value judgment these days. It might be around providing locally and wanting to invest in local businesses. It might be around the environment or around your own values of if you support gambling or not or whatever it might be. But I think that value focus has become a much greater element of people's investment decisions and just general money rules in recent times. We saw that in COVID at a very localised level with your buy local campaigns and similar. But I think the other thing that's changing in my mind is the pace of change. Everything is shifting at a million miles a minute. And I remember talking to my grandfather back in the day, and his options with money were fairly limited. He could go to the bank, and if he had a really big amount of money, he could go and maybe buy some shares and similar, but if he didn't have a big amount of money, he couldn't. These days, I did before I went and bought some more shares on Sharesies. So that option is available. I can, but I think that that's a double-edged sword. That's fantastic because it's so much more accessible. You know, the democracy element is huge. It doesn't matter if you're big or small. But I can also go onto TikTok and find both some great advice and also some absolute idiots. I found a guy recently who told me that the actual inflation rate was 9.6% once you added tax on to inflation. Trust me, man, oh man, was I trying to figure out how we got to that. And I only say that because I think what it means is that people are moving at a fast pace. They're wanting to look for, different bits of advice. But increasingly, if they're not able to get something easy peasy in one area, they're more than willing to look for another area. And that is both an advantage and a huge danger, I think, as we go forward.
Yeah. Sonia, what changes are you seeing? What trends are you seeing with young investors right now?
Yeah, and I think it's been definitely interesting watching it over the last, so Sharesies has been around 6 years now, and through that time, seen a lot of different market conditions, and our investors have been on that journey with us. And I think, notably, 2 years ago, like with COVID, what we saw is definitely more. So I guess 70% of our customers are under 40, just to give you a gist of our customer base, and we've got 600,000 people across New Zealand, Aotearoa and Australia, and they're all investing the way that they want to because we don't have a minimum. So we've got portfolios from like 1 cent to over a couple of $1 million. But what we saw with COVID was an influx, like proportionately, it was a younger base coming in. And, that's around, we've talked a lot today about how do you make retirement front of mind. And that's a really challenging thing. But when you talk to people about financial security or financial resilience, money is top of mind. Like, it is not a let's bring it up subject. It's like, it's there for all of us. It's a lens at how we see the world. And for most of us, through the research we've done, have a negative relationship to it. Yeah. And so people are coming at it with that lens. And so I think that brought it forward, and people were like, cool, what am I going to do here? How do I get myself into a good situation? So we actually saw more younger people coming into the platform. And then since then, what we see is because they've got a longer time horizon, people are kind of taking on, more likely to invest in, say, overseas investments, more likely to invest in funds over individual companies, and over, like, for the older generation, say they might invest in a few kind of well-known companies based in New Zealand, whereas what we see in our younger group is that they are, taking these exchange-traded funds or different funds on the platform, and because that gives them good diversification, but also taking on a bit of risk in that longer term, because they can take on that risk.
Can I just unpack that a tiny bit? Because I'm fascinated that people during lockdowns were going, I know what I'll do, I'll buy some shares. Can you explain that to me? Is that because they had time to think about stuff? Was it because the world was falling apart and they wanted to control some part of their lives? What was that about?
Was it because they were cheap as chips?
Yeah. I think, and we were just as surprised, like, to be honest, since we started, it was like, what's the biggest risk to the business? It would be a big market downturn, and we've done a lot of planning around that even when we first started out, because we've actually got a lot of responsibility, and we kind of have this line where the advice that or not advice, but the information we provide should be relevant for as relevant in the bad times as it is in the good, and you're actually, a lot of the things you're putting in place are to help you through these times, and because that's exactly how markets behave. They go up and down over time, and the risk mitigants and things that you can put in place around, like, diversification, like making sure you're investing an amount you can afford, things like that, kind of help you through that. And I think, what was going on at the time, it definitely did surprise us. That so many people came on to the platform, and I think it could be a mixture of a few things. Like, we had been in market for a while, and money and investing had become a bit more normalised. And I think, the optimist in me is like, great, the messages were kind of resonating with people and changing, the mindsets there. But I think the other kind of macro trend, I think people call it TINA, there is no alternative. So, like at that time as well, savings rates were really low, and house prices were really high. There was just a gaping hole.
Right.
for like what am I actually going to do with my
Save
money.
up for a house, it's pointless. I'm going to buy some shares.
Yeah, and the savings rates are so low.
Yeah.
Is that it changed the risk picture?
Yeah, gotcha.
For people? Yeah. That you probably have a view on
Well,
that.
can I just jump in? Because I mean, that
Yeah.
is something that I found quite fascinating through the last few years. Is that, the conversation used to be that, look, if you just work hard enough and similar, you will get onto the housing market and similar. And I think sort of with COVID, particularly the huge elevation in house prices, is that, some people were near that position and, they managed to get in over the last year or so at 2.2%, with nearly $1 million of debt hanging around their neck and similar. But they managed to get there. What's interesting is all the other young people I've talked to, and you see this in some of the numbers as well, who basically went, it's sort of, it's not the house of travel, it's house or travel. And now that I can't get into the house, I'm looking at travel, and I sort of say travel or something else because that opportunity doesn't exist. But what's been coming forward as well in a lot of discussions is people going, look, the traditional ways of making money, if you will, of putting it in the bank and just working hard won't get me there. There's no way on earth that that's going to get me the deposit and the ability to repay my mortgage when I eventually get it, if I can. And so increasingly, I think there has been a shift in that risk tolerance that has said to people, look, if you want to be able to actually get there, whether or not investing in shares is your long-term goal or just to save up for a house, that's the only real way that you're going to be getting money. And so I say that because that's why we're also seeing people increasingly look at new opportunities with NFTs, with crypto and similar, because it was seen as this is my only realistic option of actually building up enough cash quicker than the rest. I can put it in a savings account or similar, and yeah, maybe as I head to retirement I can think of buying a home, but if I want to get there before I start a family, I've got to take a bit more of a risk. And again, that's I think a shift that's emerging over time, that because we have more access, you can take that risk. It's so much more available. There's a lot of information out there. The quality, again, sometimes dubious. Again, just because this crowd seemed to like the first anecdote. I had one guy the other day who swore black and blue that there was no ability for the US Fed over in the States to make money. It was actually 3 banks and a big cabal that created money, and that's why I should invest in NFTs now. And again, I mean, these are the thing though that I think is important to communicate is these are well-educated people. These are not fringe wackos. They are people who genuinely like, this is how I'm going to make my investment decisions. And although they're not the everyone in the investing space, increasingly people are taking that risk. So people who were early adopters, if you will, into the share space are starting to move beyond that. People who weren't comfortable to start with are now moving into that sort of more normalised space, which is fantastic and unlocks some real opportunities. But I think I'm a touch worried about the reasons that we're going into that, because I feel that people feel that they must go in, and probably importantly over the last few years have felt like investments were a sure thing, and at the moment the current market situation is quite difficult, because I'm talking to a lot of people who are saying, when do I get the money back? And it's like, well, again, what time horizon? If you're checking, your account every 3 seconds, not anytime soon. If you're willing to leave it there for 5 years, and so I think that's the element of risk that I highlight, is not only is risk shifting, but again, the pace of change and the level of timeliness that we're looking at has increased substantially, which is really changing the game in this space.
So it's really fascinating about what's driving the investment. Can I ask, so if you believe middle-aged columnists and radio hosts, the problem with young people is they spend too much money on avocado. That's obviously nonsense, but what are we doing? What are young people doing? How are young people sabotaging their own financial lives? Anybody? I was looking at you just because
I don't know if we are.
Okay, all right.
I mean, look, by the same token, the fact that if I bought a house this year, or if that was magically possible, I've been paying 49% of my income, because the last 30 years the blokes in power have made sure that there's no possibility for me to get a house, and the decision makers are also making sure that it's easier to keep the current house in Candala than it is to build a new one. I feel like we've been sabotaged, not sabotaging ourselves. We're working pretty hard, and I think increasingly at the moment we actually know that young people are working longer hours to try and make it ahead. They're looking at new opportunities. So I'd say we're doing our darndest to get into a good position. We've talked about passive income and similar before. So actually I think we're trying to sort of put our fingers in as many pies, because we realise that it's not as easy as it used to be when the government gave me money to buy a house and build a house. Now I've actually got to work for it and then some. So I'd reject that. We've looked at the price of avocados. Trust me, I would have to be eating a metric ton of avocados each and every day to make that worthwhile. So I think though that again that's why we're looking for these new opportunities, and that's why I think that the advice from these two on both sides highlights the need for us to look at those a lot more, because as much as we're at the moment talking about those who are able to get into the area, we also know there's a lot that can't, and I sort of I did some homework, trust me. And this is from last week from ASB, saying that 30% of young Kiwis don't have enough money to cover even a month's worth of expenses. 53% of young Kiwis don't have $1,000 left over. But that's the sort of thing where again they're not even able to pay their way each and every week, let alone then thinking about emergency fund, and then alone thinking then about investment. So the base case I think is hugely challenging. Cheese is $20 a kg, and we're talking about investment opportunities. So I think the structure of that means that we've got some real issues, at the base level to sort out before we go higher. Rant over.
I want to know if a house is still the goal. Te Kahukura, is that still the dream?
Well, for me, growing up, I saw it as the kind of only way to build wealth, and that was like what I was told, that was the goal, buy your first home and you'll be set for the rest of your life. I feel like everything is set around owning your own home. Like the pension is only a realistic amount of money to live on if you own a home outright. Otherwise it's not, and like everything in society is based off of owning your own home. But today, I don't think it's a realistic goal for me in the short term to be purchasing my own home, which is really sad, I think, for a lot of, Māori. Like, this is our whenua and we can't even own a home on it. But in saying that, like the other day I went to the bank to do an application for a credit card to build my credit score, and I got rejected for a credit card with a limit of $500. Like, they're not going to give me a home loan, and it's just crazy, like... It's not fair.
No, I would like to sign a chit to fix that, but I don't think anybody would pay any attention to my chits.
Can I add just around the, linking maybe the saboteur question and the home ownership question, which is like, I agree, I don't think there is much saboteuring going on or self-sabotage. I think it's more like a way-finding, because like so much about the advice that we've been given, or so much about how the way the world works is to work in a certain circumstance. And as highlighted, it's like, what's the deposit now? It's like 6, you'd need 6 numbers, right? And I don't know about
easily.
You, but it's like, that is a monster first financial goal, right? Whereas like the advice I was given growing up was, just get that first house, get on the property ladder. And it's like, so that's often the first advice, you're given, but that's a monster milestone. Like, I don't know, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but it's like, I don't know how many people have seen 6 figures in a savings account before, and it's kind of like, that's huge. And so I think it is a bit of a wayfinding and going, actually, that advice doesn't work in this context, and what is going to work, and how are we going to find our way through this?
My parents sold a car to put a deposit on their first house. That's
was
what
it a Lamborghini?
Was. No, it was one of those ones you crank start. I believe it was.
And you would probably know percentage of like income to house price ratio.
Well, that's double digits. I'm just thinking how much I can get for my RAV4, then if that's going to help. I think if I can, because one interesting thing that was brought up that in terms of whether or not young people especially aspire to housing, because I think in general if you get to that point you would like to, but I think as well there's a change which is just a reality check for a lot of young people, that because 100k is not that easy to acquire quickly, increasingly people are thinking that's changing our outlook. It means that we know that young people are getting into relationships later in life, they're getting married and having children similar later in life, and part of that is around housing. But I think as well as that, one of the reasons that we're often looking for other investment options is because we do want to make money. But again, with such a huge step, you're climbing ladders upon ladders to get up to the housing one. Other investment opportunities are more doable. I can go in with $10 or 1 cent or whatever it might be and get on that ladder. I don't have to sort of wait before I get on to the golden investment of housing. But because of that, and because people are not not living in the same place, we're a lot more mobile. I think that's also meaning that social mobility is huge. People are thinking more short term because they can't see the ability to put down roots. Because of that, they're making those investment decisions that are generally a bit more short term in terms of flexibility. Now, I say that because I might invest for the long term, but I always know that if I need to, I can take that money out of my Sharesies account, out of my other investments and similar, because I'm moving countries, because I'm thinking, about moving cities or whatever it might be. Whereas once I've, bought the house and once I'm on the baked beans diet for the next 5 years, that's me. So I think increasingly, and it's sort of it's a vicious circle, because I find it difficult to get into a house. I make decisions that mean I don't get into a house as quickly, perhaps, and then it sort of cycles round. So there's a much more diversified spread of people, I would expect, when it comes to making those decisions.
Yeah. Right.
It's also complicated it's not just purely a financial choice, like it is quite an emotional, thing to own a home, or, and some people are driven by that and some people aren't. We need housing, we need places to live, and that's, a big, part.
It's not just about money. We've only got 6 minutes left, so I'm going to romp through some of the questions from the beautiful people in the room. There's some great financial advice on social media, but there's also some terrible advice on social, which is really dangerous. How can we tackle this issue? I'm looking at you.
I think, back to my first point, like being diversified with who you're listening to. I feel like our minds are like sponges, and whatever you listen to, whatever you read, it's just going to absorb it. So make sure that you take everything with a grain of salt, because a lot of the people on Instagram, like myself, aren't qualified. Take it with a grain of salt, listen, and then do your own research from credible sources before you actually put your money into anything.
I want to stay with you for the next question. What inspired you to do what you're doing, and how did you go about building your financial capability?
Yeah, so being Māori inspired me to help Māori. That's just natural for Indigenous communities all over the world, is to, help your own community. And finance was something I'm passionate about, so I thought, what better way to help Ngāi Māori than to talk about something I'm passionate about.
Can I ask, why was finance something you were passionate about? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I guess in lots of Māori communities like my own, my mum always put me in really good schools, like Catholic English schools, and so I was a minority in all of those schools, and I always felt like there were things that made me different, and being like an analytical person I am, I was like, well, what makes me different? It's like, well, I'm Māori, I have less money than all these other kids do, and there's a variety of things that I can change, and there's a variety of things that I can't. Being Māori, I can't change, and that's cool because I love being Māori, but finances are something that we can change, and we can change for our future generations. So, I think it's something really cool that we can help benefit future generations and improve the kind of trajectory that we're going towards.
I'm going to throw this question at all of you, but I'm probably going to look at Sonia as I come to the end of it. Do you think we can educate young people out of intergenerational poverty, wealth inequality, and other systemic issues that drive poor outcomes for consumers?
You're going to me first.
Yeah, I just thought I'd chuck that one at you.
So it was.
Can we educate people out of that? Is that doable?
I think it's such a, we would have seen the research from Joe today, like, under 50% of Kiwis feel financially secure and resilient, or however it was put. And like that's a really key problem, right? We're talking over half don't feel good about their financial situation, which is a huge problem. And I think that's not just going to take one lens in this industry or across all of us to solve that. I think it's going to take all of us working together, and we've all got a role to play in it. I don't think it's going to be easy, but do I think it's possible? The Pollyanna inside me says yes. And I think we all have to kind of keep that dream alive, otherwise we're not going to get there, right? And I think I think it goes from cultural, like I've heard today, and this is no shade on anything, but it's like how we've talked about Kiwis being bad at saving and investing a lot today. And I think, think of a time that you were told you were bad at something. Did you then enjoy doing that thing, or did you then decide, actually, I'm not going to do maths, or I'm not going to do
Is that why I'm a spender?
I'm not going to, pursue this creative project or sing or in public, but any of these things. And I think, like, we're asking people, that belief not only impacts how how we create products and services to support people, but it also changes their belief on themselves and what they're possible for. So, I would just watch the stereotyping on the bad, and go, actually, like, if we created tools and services, like, how could this be different? And then the other one is, like, we've talked about so the sharing of information and the needing to get multiple points of view, and people are being more open now, right, and talking about money. But in institutions, we've got so much institutionalized knowledge that can actually help people, and it's not actually advice, that we can just share some stuff, and then people are consuming so much information and know how to filter that now. We're very good at it, and so it's kind of like, how are you just putting that information out, and instead of worrying about, of course it can be used badly, and there will be those situations, but I think on the whole, more information's got to be a good thing to help people kind of make choices for themselves and all of that. So, yeah.
I'm going to throw one question that's specifically for you, Brad, and then I'm going to ask a final question for all three of you to answer, and we're going to go slightly over time and steal a little bit of time from lunch, but I don't care. Brad, the question for you is, what do you think has driven the change in the personal values aspect of people's desired use of money?
Oh, I mean, a lot of things. I think probably in recent times, looking at outcomes, if you will, across the world and not being happy with them. Am I happy that the planet's burning at the moment? No. Is there as easy an ability as, one person of the team of 5 million or the team of 8 billion globally to make a huge difference? As much as I'd like to say it, mathematically not as much. But man, I can vote with my wallet. And again, the mighty dollar rules. At the end of the day, we know that people make financial decisions for a range of reasons, but primarily because you need that stuff to live and get by. And so if I'm willing to if I've got options of where I can put it, and I can choose a better option that gets me towards my end goal, because I feel passionately about it and because I'm not necessarily seeing the same outcomes that I would like to see, that is going to push me. And it's I mean, how many birds can you kill with the same sort of argument there, in terms of if I can make money and do better outcomes and provide better for New Zealand and similar, sounds like a good job to me. And I think part of that, though, and one thing I do want to come back to here is, just as it flashed up, time is up, is highlight as well that with all the changes that we're seeing, it's pretty hard to stem the rising tide, if you will. And we've talked a lot. Well, I've talked a lot about social media and those opportunities. I'd always like to go away with a bit more of a tangible outcome for these sort of rooms, rather than just we've been gas bagging for an hour. And I guess I say that because there is a lot of pretty poor information out there, and I think there's a real ability. I'd love to see a single source of truth, if you will. That's impossible in this field, but I think a bit more of a joined up approach, so that you do sort of have the key messages being put forward time and time again, not to counter the misinformation, but to make sure there is a bit more balance out there between the good and the bad. And I think that's something I'd like to see from an institutional level, that could enable a lot more for all groups. Because let's be real, although the three of us are trying to make money, if you will, and as everyone in the room is, we're also doing it in a sense because we think it's a good reason. And again, that's good, but sometimes we're lacking in resources to really take that even further. So some commitments from the room, some of those bigger institutions getting on board and looking at how can we meet people where they are rather than requiring them to come to us, has got to be a key takeout from my point of view.
It's a really good point, and you have kind of answered the question that I want to put to all of you for the end, and it's a double-headed question. What would you all hope for most when it comes to young New Zealanders' financial lives, and what can the financial industry do now to enable young New Zealanders to thrive? Double-headed question, starting with Te Kahukura.
Wait, can you say it again?
Yes, I can. I know, it was a ridiculously long question. What do you hope for most when it comes to young New Zealanders' financial lives, and what can the people in the room and the people they represent do to help that?
I think that just being knowledgeable about finance will help a lot. Being able to understand the different concepts when it comes to investing and managing your money, I think that will prevent a lot of the scams and stuff that impact a lot of youth. If we're able to have a basic understanding of how money works and the basics of investing, then I think that can prevent a lot of the scams that happen. I think that what what I aspire for youth is firstly that it's a realistic goal to attain a home, and I can't control the market. I'm sitting next to an economist, so
You're right, though. No, it's
but yeah, I think that should be a realistic goal for each and every one of us in this room and outside of this room to be able to own our own home for our whānau, and to be able to create memories in that home, like bigger than a financial goal. That should be, it should just be something that everyone's able to attain, and whether that be from creating, growing your portfolio through other forms of investing, like shares at Sharesies, then yeah, then that would be cool.
Beautiful. Yeah. Sonia?
Cool. Yeah, I would think about, so our whole mission is that we want to create financial empowerment for everyone. And I think when you actually sit and imagine that world, and actually try and any just quick image that gives you, that's hugely inspiring for generations to come. And I think it would really create this huge generational shift. Like if we do that now and we start to pave that way, that's going to pay off for generations to come. And then I think what can we do about that? I think it comes back to that maybe instead of recognising people for what they're not, what are they? And I think when you're young, you've got so much potential, and I think one of the biggest assets when it comes to money, which is time. And so how do we really lean into that and really make sure that instead of asking people, oh no, come back when you've got this, it's well, you do have time now, and actually small changes now or small bits now have huge impacts over your life. So how do we actually design for that? Use that asset. Why, how do we put that to work? So I think that would be an ask for the group.
Yeah, lovely. And Brad, anything to add?
Just, smart money habits early. So you sort of build that up over time, so it becomes muscle memory. You don't think about it as much because that you've got that understanding. The going to the bank and getting a credit card and knowing that you'll pay it off every month because that's a smart thing to do, rather than getting into one bad situation once and that sort of dictating the rest of your financial journey. So start small, start early. But I think also the aspiration here has got to be that people can make their own choices. That is the beauty of what everyone is trying to achieve, is that you can make a choice, and I just want to make sure that people make a well-informed choice so they can get to whatever their end goal is. Whether that's to make money, to be sustainable, to go on a holiday, that's completely up to them. But if they're making a well-informed decision, they know what the risks are and what the outcomes might likely be, that's a good position, and I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're on the right path.
And in the end, that's what money is, right? Money is choices. That's the bottom line for all of us. Thank you, the three of you. Amazing. Huge round of applause for Sonia, Brad, and Te Kahukura.